So the purpose of today's session is just to give you an overview of how do you start with configurations in SOLIDWORKS and push all the way up to something like a DriveWorks solution for your automation. So there was a time when if you wanted to buy your happy little car, you had to actually go right down to the lot and visit this guy. He would show you the options for the car. He would show you what colors they had. If they had a special car in the back, he'd be able to let you know. But now it's actually a lot different. You don't necessarily have to go down to the lot if you don't want to, but in fact, you can go right online and order your own car. Configure it to your liking, have the exact options that you're looking for, be able to have a guided price, and then at the end of the day, have it shipped to a location where you can come pick it up. In a very similar way, in today's digital manufacturing environment, many more companies are actually going to a very similar model for the configuration of their products. They want a customer to be able to come online, see exactly the options that they would want, configure according to those options, and be able to get a custom version of an already existing product that meets all of their needs. And they'd like to be able to get a quote and perhaps something shipped very shortly after. So if you wanted to go online and go to your Tesla website, you'd be able to actually order it now. And we're actually going to do exactly that. Not quite order the Tesla, but show you what you can do and kind of bring the whole thing to closure with that website later on in the presentation. All right, so here's our agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about manual configuration methods that already exist in SOLIDWORKS. And in no way are we saying that SOLIDWORKS is not a good tool for manual configuration and all these other methods as well. But what we're saying is each of them have their appropriate use, and then perhaps you're maxing those uses out and you're asking, well, where should I go next? The next step after manual configurations is a lot of times will be design tables. Perhaps it might be the configuration publisher, depending on your needs. We're not going to cover configuration publisher today, but we're just trying to show some options of where you could step up. DriveWorks Xpress would be another option that you might think of that already exists if you didn't know in SOLIDWORKS today. And then from there, you might step up to DriveWorks Professional. All right, so what we're going to do is start talking about some manual configuration methods that currently exist today in SOLIDWORKS that you could use, and then talk about, well, what happens when you actually max out those methods and you're looking for something else that can help you to attain automation. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the well-known configuration tab. So in SOLIDWORKS, you have a tab right after the Model tab where you can add a configuration if you'd like. And again, to review, a configuration basically is just a different version of the exact same part. So we're talking about the same part, just a little bit different. And you're going to hear me say that phrase a few times in this presentation. So you can do that with parts, and you can do that with an assembly. All right, so let's see, just to remind ourselves. We're going to start a short video here that kind of gives you the concepts. So in this video, what you see me doing is configuring the first floor of an observatory. And what I'm going to do is choose Add Configuration, apply configuration name. And then my idea is that I want to be able to have a 35-foot configuration of this already existing part. So I'll right-click on that dimension, and you can see I'm going down to the right part of the Modify Dimensions dialog, choosing this configuration and saying I want it to apply to this configuration only. Change it to 35, check it off, and now if I swap between the default and also the 35, you can see that there's actually a difference between the two configurations. That's configuration that you're probably most likely familiar with today. Now, there are some drawbacks to the configuration tab. One of them is it's a very manual process. So if all you're trying to do is to set up some pretty simple configurations, and even the reasonably complex, it's not going to be too difficult for you. But if you're trying to do a lot more than that, the manual process might be a limiting factor. Also, it would be difficult to mass configure. So let's say you wanted to set up a whole lot of configurations at once. It would be kind of hard to do that in the configuration tab. Also, it can be easy to lose your place with dimensions. You might have noticed that when I clicked on this configuration in the Modify Dimensions dialog, it was for that specific dimension. So it might be difficult to remember what dimensions you actually did that for, and possibly lose your place if you have multiple configurations to do that for. Now, my personal favorite way to do manual configurations is the Modify Configurations dialog that looks like this. Now, you can access this in multiple ways. But the basic idea is you're trying to have something that's more complex than a regular manual configuration tab and less complex than a design table that lets you quickly configure something and pull in dimensions and features so that you can change their aspects. Now again, you can do this for parts and you can do it for assemblies. All right, so let's see this. So what we're going to do again is play this video, and now you're going to see that I'm going to right-click on that dimension for the 35, and I'll choose instead Configure Dimension, and you see a little table pop up. Now this table is very useful because you can pull a lot of different things into it and save it for later, very similar to how you can actually access a design table later. So I'll go ahead and create a brand new configuration. Now what's nice about it is when I hit return, it actually says create a new configuration again. If you wanted to just keep creating configurations and hitting return over and over again, you could very quickly create new configurations. I decided to hit the tab key and change the size of the boss extrude that makes the height of the gate. I said I'm going to make that 38 feet. Now, when I click apply, it actually applies that dimensional change. And I'm just going to save this as something called table. You can name it whatever you want, if you wanted to call it observatory or anything else. And I'll save that guy and click OK. And then now you can see it's actually under the Tables tab. And then when I click on 38 feet, I have a new configuration of a different size. And I can access the table later. So you can also pull in more dimensions. You could also suppress features if you wanted to. So the Modify Configurations tab, or the Modify Configurations option, is actually, in my opinion, easier to use than the Manual Configuration tab, but it doesn't require as much complexity as a design table. But it does have its drawbacks as well. It's still a manual process, and there's no parametric control. Now, that might be a fancy word that you haven't had experience with, but when I say parametric, I basically mean you can change it on the fly. Now, what if you've hit the glass ceiling on both of these methods, manual configuration methods, and then also modify configuration methods, and you're thinking, I wish I had more flexibility to be able to solve some of these issues that I'm seeing? What about multi-level configuring? In other words, what you're trying to do is start at the assembly level and be able to control the part. Well, one way that you can do that is to configure the part and then create a matching assembly configuration. And we'll talk about why that is in just a couple minutes here. All right, so let's see what we mean. So in this video, I'm going to start off. If you look up here, you can see that I'm with first floor walls and flooring.sldprt. So I'm in the part. Very quickly, you notice I've got a 40-foot configuration of that guy. Now I want to be able to have a 40-foot configuration at the assembly level or any particular size that I choose from the part level. So I swapped really quickly to the assembly. You can see .sldasm up here in the top of the screen. And what I'm going to do is create a 40-foot configuration at the assembly level as well. So now the next step that I've created that configuration is to go ahead and choose the part and associate that with the appropriate configuration of the part. So I've got a 40-foot configuration of the part referenced in a 40-foot configuration of the assembly. And so in that sense, I'm actually changing the size of the part from the assembly level. Now, that has some drawbacks as well. So one of the drawbacks is it's still a manual process, right? And it can be difficult to picture how everything fits together. Just like with the dimensions at the part level, you can lose your place. So you've got a lot of different assemblies or sub-assemblies that are being configured, or parts that are being configured and referenced in different configurations of the assembly, and you can start to lose your place. Now, you can create a Modify Configurations table at the assembly level that helps to solve that problem. But even if you do that, it can be difficult to follow the table because it might be so massive that it becomes untenable for you. You also want to be aware of unexpected configuration results. So as an example, I want you to picture that you have a top-level assembly, and that top-level assembly has 3 different configurations. Each of those configurations is referencing one particular subassembly. And that one particular subassembly, let's say, is referencing a part. So you've got 3 levels, 3 different configurations at the top level, all referencing one subassembly. That subassembly is referencing a part. Now, what happens if you decide that you switch to, let's say, configuration A at the top level, and you're thinking, well, that part in there, I want to change that to a different configuration. Well, you go ahead and change the configuration to that part, let's say, in your model tree at your assembly level, and you're thinking, great, I've got part or configuration A of the top level assembly referencing a certain configuration of the part that I want. But I don't want configurations B and C at the top level to reference it. But you went ahead and swapped it. Now you go to do your drawing, and you look at your drawing, and you say, all right, let me go ahead and make a drawing for configuration B and a drawing for configuration C. And then you're surprised and you say, why in the world are configuration B and C referencing that configuration of the part that I only wanted for configuration A? Well, it's because you might have forgotten that all of those components, or all those configurations were referencing the same exact subassembly. And when you swap the part for that subassembly, it swaps it for every other thing that subassembly is referencing. So the other two top-level configurations. Now, if that is confusing, that's exactly the point. It can be difficult to track how all of these different assemblies are referencing one another in parts in different levels. Well, you might need a more tight solution to be able to help you. Now, what about top-down control? So you've tried the configuration methods for manual and modify. You've went ahead and you tried doing a configuration method where you're referencing different configurations of parts and so forth from the assembly level. What about top-down control? Well, to me, this is the most fun thing to do in SOLIDWORKS. I'm actually doing it right now with a design project that I'm working on. I'm referencing equations at the top level to be able to control things, and I'm using the custom property tab builder in order to be able to put in different values. Those values go into custom properties. They push into equations and dimensions, and I'm able to control the part level. At this point, if you're pushing this far, you're essentially trying to create your own homegrown automation solution. All right, so let's see what I mean. Let me go ahead and click on this guy, and you can see the Custom Property Tab Builder. I find that this is a very underused tool, so if you happen to not be in a place where you need a full automation solution quite yet, this is a fantastic place to go. It has its limitations, but I absolutely love this tool. So what we're doing here is we're actually designing a form in the Property Tab Builder application that's separate from SOLIDWORKS. So you build it in the application, and then it shows up in the actual SOLIDWORKS screen itself. So I've got gate height, depth, and thickness. I'm going to create another one for gate position. And now, the purpose of the tab builder is for me to be able to create that form in the task pane inside SOLIDWORKS. And then once I create these different configurations that I'm looking for, gate height, depth, thickness, and position, and I shouldn't say configuration, I should say controls, I can push these values directly into file properties inside the part or the assembly, and those file properties can be used for calculations or to be connected to a dimension. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and fill out this form, and then when I click Apply, I'll open up the file properties, and you can see on my Custom tab, there they go, 36, 4, 3, and 2, not only in the Custom Properties task pane over there to the right, but also in the Custom Properties themselves. They've been pushed in. Now, once they're available, all you really got to do at that point is go ahead and, if you wanted to, create a global variable. If you didn't want to, you didn't have to. You can actually connect things to dimensions directly to file properties. It doesn't have to go through a global variable first. But I'll go ahead and say that my gate height underscore V, and that's just to make sure that I know that we're talking about a global variable. You can't name the global variable the same thing that you do a file property. I'm going to multiply it by 12 in order to get the inches. And I'm connecting each of these global variables to actual file properties. So basically at this point, what I'm able to do is push in the values of my file properties, reference those with the global variables, run a calculation off of it, and then I get a nice inch calculation. Now again, if I didn't want to be able to do the global variable, but instead I wanted to go directly to the file property and connect that with a dimension, I could do that. But at this point, I'm going to choose a dimension, set it equal to the global variable, but you notice 2 down, there's also file properties. You could connect it directly to the file property, and basically as soon as you change it in the form, it just pushes right into the dimension. But I ran a calculation off the file property first, and so I'm going to connect those dimensions instead. And so I've got 4 dimensions I want to be able to control: the height of the gate, basically the thickness of the gate, the position of the gate, and so forth. And so now I'm going to apply a different size to this guy. And then as soon as you rebuild, you end up with a different size. Now, again, my favorite way of doing it, but it does have some drawbacks. It will affect the part directly. So if you forgot that you have this component that's actually connected to a bunch of other assemblies, then you're going to be changing the component every time you fool around with it in the custom property tab builder, and all the other assemblies are going to get updated. So you can get around that. Just make sure that you have a copy that only applies to this particular thing that you're working on. You got to pack and go every new configuration. So you change all the different dimensions and so forth, change up your assembly and your parts. You want to pack and go that guy in order to be able to have a different version of that assembly. Eventually, it can slow things down significantly because you have a lot of equations that are basically bogging things down. And I've had a customer that actually had that issue where he decided to go to an automation solution because he had so many equations that were pushing into this guy that it was keeping it from being able to solve quickly. Now, at this point, again, you're basically designing an automation solution, and you're probably ready to start pushing the limits with what you can do. And you might want to start thinking about something like a DriveWorks Express, but we're almost there. Let's talk about design tables. So why might you want to use a design table? It's because you have too many something, maybe too many configurations that have to be added at once, or too many parameters that have to be captured. In other words, dimensions and properties and so forth that you want to control. You got too many of them things that you're trying to capture at once. Maybe you want an easier Excel-based parametric control. Well, that's a possibility. And basically, it can do a lot of what the custom property tab builder can do, but now what you're really doing is you have the full power of Microsoft Excel instead of having to do all of that stuff in the equations dialog inside of SOLIDWORKS. All right, so let's see what we mean. So what you're seeing me do now is I've got a design table that's been added. And again, one of the powers of design tables is that when you add them and you choose automatic, it'll scan your entire model to be able to find all of the possible dimensions that you might want to control. So I'll go ahead and edit this in a new window. Now, if you notice, this is Microsoft Excel. And I find that many customers don't take the full use of this. The first sheet is where the only thing that you're putting in there is the syntax to be able to control different aspects of the design, whether it be a custom property, or if it's a particular dimension, or if it's a particular feature, whether or not it's suppressed or unsuppressed. You can control all kinds of things. And so you can see here, I'm trying to control $PRP gate height. So that's actually a file property that I'm pushing into. And then again, you could push that file property into a global variable if you wanted to, and then control it from there. But in this particular case, I'm actually running the calculation on this second sheet called calculations. So if you look at it, I've got gate height in feet and then converting it to inches. So again, you can get as complex as you want at this point. Essentially, your spreadsheet can have multiple sheets in it, all feeding into one another, just like a regular Microsoft Excel workbook. And then as long as you take those calculations and feed them into the first sheet, you're golden. You've just created a very, very robust automation solution. And I've done that method as well. So years ago, I designed a lightsaber for Star Wars Day and had all kinds of calculations on second and third and fourth sheets that fed into the original model on the first sheet. So now what we're going to do is go back to the first sheet and show you that basically I'm referencing cell B2 from the second sheet, the calculation sheet. And then if I want to go back and change to a different value, I can do that. My inches immediately update, and it updates on the first sheet, and then my model updates as well. So now if I were to go into my custom properties, you'd see now I'm at 384 for the gate height. And then if I were to take a measurement of it, you see now it's 32 feet high instead of what it was. So design tables are about as close as you can get to a full automation solution just with basic SOLIDWORKS tools. Some of the drawbacks of design tables, though, is that they can break. And you might have experienced this yourself. You go out to column CH, and then column CH is the last straw that broke the camel's back, and you can't go out any further because essentially it just stops solving. I have definitely experienced that before. It can be extremely frustrating. Maybe you also deleted something out of the model that you didn't realize, and now one of the columns no longer references something that works, and it keeps telling you I can't solve because this particular dimension no longer exists. Then you got to go find that thing. Also, it can increase file size because imagine it, you get really happy that you've got a nice design table and you make 150, 200 configurations of a component that all have complex calculations going on, and then it brings things down to a screaming halt. or they just don't go as far as you want. Maybe you're thinking, I love the how parametric it is and how easily I can control dimensions and so forth. But what about being able to push values into the drawing, like into not if I don't have a PDM solution, being able to push something into the title block automatically, or being able to change that on the fly by form input. What if I want to be able to create documents? And again, maybe I don't have a PDM solution that could do that for me, but I want to be able to insert pictures into a document, or I want to be able to control text in a document, put things into an array. Well, you're not going to be able to do that with this kind of a solution. You might have to graduate to something like DriveWorks Express. Now, DriveWorks Express is the entry-level product for the DriveWorks suite of products. And it's going to live in SOLIDWORKS right on your Evaluate tab. So if you go to your Evaluate tab, and then you come over to DriveWorks Express right there, you can open that guy up right now, even while you're on the phone here with this webinar, and see that you have it, whether it's standard, SOLIDWORKS Standard, Premium, or Professional. Now, it's going to give you a nice rules engine that's separate from equations. The reason that that's nice is that means that you no longer have to worry about getting your SOLIDWORKS bogged down with equations that it has to solve. DriveWorks will handle that for you on the back end. It's going to be upgradable to other packages of DriveWorks. In my opinion, that's the most important thing that it'll offer you. So if you're really serious about design automation and you've really pushed the limits and gotten to the point where a nice spreadsheet isn't as far as you want to go and you want to be able to use a DriveWorks Express solution, well, you're probably going to max that out as well, and you might need to grow to one of the other packages of DriveWorks, and it'll be easily upgradable. It's basically for automating in assembly, so it's not going to do a whole lot more. It's going to let you automate your custom properties, automate dimensions and features, but not much else. And you're creating and storing copies. So I like to think of it like a Lego bin. You basically have a Lego bin, you throw a bunch of parts in there that you can use for later. You take copies of those parts, you drive them to different values under a different file name, close them down, and essentially you've made a pack and go of a different size. All right, so let's see it in action. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on my Evaluate tab, go over to DriveWorks Express, and that's going to open up the dialog. I click on Create or Change Database, and now I'm actually going to create a new database. And it's basically a Microsoft Access database in the background. And that database is going to store all of the values that you're putting in to be able to control your inputs and so forth. I'll call this guy First Floor. And then I'm going to use the open model, so this observatory that you see. Go ahead and use that guy, and if you look down here, I have dimensions and features that I can capture, custom properties, and I can even change configurations of the part or the assembly. Now, you can associate a drawing with it, but you can't control the drawing. You basically can spit out a new drawing along with the model, and whatever changes you've made in the model, they'll push into the drawing. All right, so I'm just going to filter down and say the only thing in the entire assembly structure that I want to control is the first floor walls and flooring, and just that component. So that's actually just a big part that you've seen me work with so far in all of the other examples. So I'll check that guy off. Go ahead and open that guy up. Now you can see that I'm in the part up here. And then now, what I want to be able to do is control different dimensions. So I'm going to capture that dimension. I'm clicking on it, giving it a nice DriveWorks name. And you can see it's going to show up here as one that I've captured. And then I'm going to capture 3 other dimensions as well. Now moving on, I'm going to be moving along here at the top. The next thing that I'm going to do is create a form to control these guys. And when I click on Add, you can see that the form controls that are available to me are pretty simple. So right now you have text box, numeric text box, drop down, spin button, and checkbox available. And the full-grown solution of DriveWorks, you have way more than that. And we're talking things that essentially look like you coded in HTML, but you really didn't. So I'm going to set a minimum and maximum value for each of these guys. That way I can kind of idiot-proof it and prevent people from putting in values that are too big or too small. I'm also going to create a file name property so that I can dial in a different file name suffix to be able to put on the end of the file name. Now what I'm doing is I'm creating rules with those things that I just captured. So each of those properties that I captured, I'm actually going to apply a different rule to it. So for all the dimensions, I'm basically saying I want to take the value that you put in on the form, multiply it by 12, And that way it'll calculate what it's supposed to be in inches, because I want to be able to put it in by feet. So this is your rules builder. Once you're done with your rules builder, you actually go ahead and run it. So these are all the different I apologize. These are all the different form controls that I've created. I put in a different file name with a 1. That means it's going to append a 1 to the end of the file name. And then now it's made a new configuration. And the size definitely is what I dialed in. You'll see that it actually is 38 feet as expected. And then the next thing is, it just shows you that it created pretty much a -1 version of the assembly and a -1 version of the component. It did a pack and go essentially and copied them out. Now, DriveWorks Express is a fantastic solution, but similar to the other ways, you might reach a point where you're thinking, now I really do want to control the drawing and start making some documents or do some other things as well. So we'll jump to DriveWorks Professional. There is another solution in between called DriveWorks Solo, but I want to show you just how far you can take all of this. So with DriveWorks Professional, the first question we should answer is why CPQ and Automation? But what is CPQ? Now, CPQ stands for Configure, Price, and Quote. That's the methodology or the way of thinking that a lot of companies are moving towards. I want customers to be able to configure something on my website, price it, and be able to quote it. Or I want somebody in my engineering department to be able to configure something so that a salesperson can quote it. So why in the world would you do CPQ and automation in general? It's going to reduce the cost of your custom designs. Cost is a big factor. And you want to be able to reduce costs without necessarily reducing headcount, or perhaps you can't increase headcount. We want to be able to have a solution where we're working smarter, not harder, and still able to reduce cost. So right now you might be in a situation where in your company, you're feeling bogged down because your sales team is always asking for new custom configurations of the same exact parts or the same exact assemblies, just a little bit different. And that might be bogging down the engineering department, and perhaps the sales team isn't as happy as they would like to be because they can't get things as quickly as they would like. I've worked with customers that have, 1-week turnarounds, whole day turnarounds, maybe a couple weeks, and their sales team is saying, if we could get stuff faster, we might be able to close more deals. Now, exactly like we're talking about here, you might want to be able to respond quickly to sales inquiries. Also, you want to enhance the product and data quality so that you don't have to go back and do rework. Now, the engineering guy might be thinking, well, I just want to reduce repetitive tasks so that I can focus on new product innovation. If I just had enough time to not have to focus on creating custom designs, I'd be able to create new designs and even drive the revenue further within the company. And at the end of the day, what you're looking for is more revenue per order. So if the sales guy is happy and the engineering team is happy, most likely the company will be happy on the whole, because the sales guy is going to be able to close more business for his order because he's going to be able to get the orders out more quickly. That'll lead to more gross profit for the company as well, because now the engineering team isn't bogged down as a resource for that, and that decreases what the cost is to actually create these new custom configurations. And also, you're freed up for new product innovation, which is going to be another revenue stream. But why specifically DriveWorks CPQ and automation? So what you're going to be getting is a scalable solution all the way to the web. The projects are going to be created, maintained, and owned by you. And you're going to get local support every step of the way. So you're going to have new releases that come out every year with updates. So they release about 3 service packs a year or so. And anytime there's a big release in SOLIDWORKS that affects how DriveWorks operates, they're going to come out with a service pack. And you're going to be part of a family of customers where you're talking over 1,000 people have the software installed and they're using it. Every year there's also a DriveWorks World, which I'm hoping to attend this coming year. That's going to be happening in the spring. And that's where you have DriveWorks users from all around the world converging in one place. And this year it'll be right in downtown Chicago, being able to learn about the software and apply it. And you actually can even get DriveWorks professional training and certification right there at that site. Now, you've got 3 different software packages. You could either get DriveWorks Express for free, like we've talked about, where you can do some entry-level design automation. That's going to be in every level of SOLIDWORKS. Or maybe you might want to do a step up, and you want to step up to Solo. That'll let you control your drawings, being able to put custom notes in there, being able to drive dimensions and things of that nature. You also might want more advanced form control so that things look a lot more pretty. So complex combo boxes and picture controls and things of that nature. You're also going to get more complex model control as well. There is free online training for it. And what I usually tell customers is, if you've maxed out DriveWorks Express and you're not so certain that you need Solo, go ahead and put yourself on a challenge to try to get Solo for free. And what I mean by that is, if you start off with Express and you have a really well-developed solution, then that solution can easily upgrade into Solo. And since it upgrades into Solo, you've already got a working project that's saving you money, and then you're able to take the savings that you've proven out and use that to purchase the software. Because you get a nice 30-day free trial. And within that 30 days, you can do the how-to video clips for free, and then you're able to get up and running pretty quickly. And by the end of the 30 days, again, prove out to the leadership that this is not only working, it's working well, and we've saved money within that 30 days. So you can upgrade to Pro, and what that's going to do basically is allow customers and people internally to configure. So essentially, you want to think, if I want more than just me to be using the software, and I want Bob next to me, Mary in marketing, and whoever else to be using it, I want all of these folks to be able to configure. Well, you're going to need to deploy it across the company or even across the entire world for customers to use it online. So that's when you're going to go up to DriveWorks Pro. And some of the biggest reasons you want to go to Pro is because you want to be able to link to your ERP, MRP, CRM, or even to CAM. We'll talk about the different things it can integrate with and how powerful that is. But this is going to give you a nice scalable solution to the web. You're going to be able to add in whatever software modules you might need to make things go. And then it's essentially a full deployment across the world or within your organization. All right, so let's go ahead and compare. So this is a website that you could go to if you wanted. And we'll bring that website right over here for you. So this is a product comparison website, and it'll show you Express, Solo, and Pro. And then it's going to tell you, well, what's the major category, controlling SOLIDWORKS 3D models, what's the differences between them. It shows you by the check marks. And if you're not sure what that particular check mark might mean, you can click on it, and it'll actually take you to a help file so that you understand what it means. All right, so DriveWorks Pro, it's actually a collection of software. It's not just one package. So with Express, you had one seat of software. With Solo, you have one seat of software. With Pro, you've got 4. You have Administrator, which is very similar to Express and Solo. That's where you're being dangerous and you're getting the job done, making some projects. But then you also have Autopilot, which is the part that lets you automatically create different models and so forth. With Solo and with Express, you have to check off that you want to generate the models in SOLIDWORKS, because SOLIDWORKS basically is your machine shop. It's going to create your new configuration for you. You got to do that in Pro as well. You have to open up SOLIDWORKS and say, I want to check off these models to be created. But if you have Autopilot, you don't have to do that. It does that for you in the background. And it'll store them wherever you tell it to store it. So if you want it in a special folder, you want it to create special folder structure, all of that can happen automatically. Also, you got to make sure you have a seat of SOLIDWORKS that sits with it. And I don't recommend having a network seat unless you want to fool around with the options file and basically say it always gets this license. Other than that, what I would recommend is getting a nice seat of most likely standard, SOLIDWORKS standard, that can just sit right along with DriveWorks Autopilot. And it'll open up standard, generate what it needs to generate, and shut it down. It's kind of like a virtual employee. It's also going to give you the power to automatically send emails for notifications to people, and a lot more, such as being able to do things like triggered actions. So when a file hits a certain place, then DriveWorks will create a new specification automatically for you, passing whatever information into it that you would like. Or if you wanted it to, actually, I'm sorry, that would be Autopilot connectors, what I just described. But a triggered action is, well, I want you to keep things in this particular state in a workflow. So maybe I want it to hold in engineering approval. And then as soon as a file hits a certain place, it'll go from engineering approval to send to manufacturing. DriveWorks Live is the part of the software that's going to let you use it online. So whether that's on your tablet, on your iPhone, or just mobile device, or on a desktop, it's going to give you that flexibility to be able to see your forms online. It's nothing too drastic. It's just a piece of software that essentially is like Microsoft IIS. It just gives DriveWorks something to deploy through so people can actually see it on the web. And then lastly, there's DriveWorks User. So it's very similar to Live. The difference is it works inside only your internal network. And then inside your internal network, people can specify new configurations using forms, but they won't have access to the rules. All right, so let's see some examples. So I'm going to go to a website called DriveWorksLive.com. If you were to go there right now, you'd be able to do the same thing. And you can see excellent examples of what it can look like to design in a 3D space or configure in a 3D space. Down at the bottom, you have something called CPQ for manufacturing. It'll show you how DriveWorks essentially can be like Amazon.com, and it comes along free with the software. And then it shows you that you can configure product right in a product catalog. What we're going to do is focus on this example here called the trailer demo. One of my favorite demos because it looks so professional. Everything that you guys are seeing right now is all not HTML, but it's all DriveWorks. So in other words, you don't have to know HTML to make it look this nice. These are all I'm sorry, I keep saying that word. These are all DriveWorks controls or form controls that are used to be able to present a nice solution right on the internet. So I'll click Start, and then I got to choose what kind of a trailer that I want. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's choose a curtain-sided trailer. Now, if you keep your eyes down to the bottom right of the screen, you're going to notice that there's a nice price here. And then as I make changes, that price is going to update. A 3D preview is rebuilding in the background. And once it's rebuilt, I can actually take this guy and rotate it. This is not a SOLIDWORKS model. This is created from a SOLIDWORKS model. It's called a .drive3D file. Now, Drive3D files are proprietary DriveWorks files, and essentially you save them out from SOLIDWORKS as their own file type, and they're used inside DriveWorks to be able to give a nice 3D preview. Now, what can happen is you can add a scene to add even more professionalism, and then configure as needed, and then in the background, it'll generate the models according to essentially what you see on this screen. So this is a representation of what you'll get, and then in the background, it'll literally generate the SOLIDWORKS models and send them to you so that you can see them. So I'll change the height of this guy, and you can see that changed the price down here in the bottom right. I'll change the length of this guy, and you can see the price went up to a nice 81K. And then as you step through, it basically is changing the view so that you can see something else that you might want to configure. So I'll change the wheels up. I'll come over here, and I'll change to hinge doors. Next is I'll change to a different kind of foot. So I'm going to change to a standard foot instead of a rocker. And then I'll change my lighting on the back to triple hella as well. So you can see that there's nice luminescence. Choose next here, and then I'll change to none for my sidebars. And then I'll get rid of a bump bar. And then I'll change my paint to green. Gives me a nice readout. Things that are in this paragraph and also down here are according to what I have chosen. And it's all parametric. In other words, it just changes right on the fly. And then there's customer details that can be filled out. And then documentation is generated automatically on the back end. So I'm going to choose a quote. So here's a nice quote that's generated according to my configuration. I also have a cover letter. Gives me a nice preview of that cover letter. And then I also have a bill of materials. I'll go ahead and click continue, and now it's asking me to fill out my information. All right, so assuming my email is correct, what I should expect to see is that within just a few moments, an email comes into my inbox saying that all of these different things have been generated. So what do I mean by that? So it's actually giving me a nice listing of all of the documentation it's trying to generate, and it actually shows pictures of what it's generating up here. I usually at this point like to say, well, how many different departments in your company are being represented here? You got a quotation that's being sent out. Well, maybe it's your order department that does that. You have a cover letter and a bill of materials. So maybe your sales team is sending that out. You have the 3D files. Your engineering team is going to be focusing on that. All of these pieces of documentation are actually being generated automatically by DriveWorks, including PDFs, because DriveWorks is going to spit out all different kinds of file types for you. So let me go ahead and show you what the email looks like. So here's the email that was sent by DriveWorks. And if you look down here at the bottom, you have documentation that's automatically been generated and attached to the email for you. So I'll click on my Excel quotation here. And now, if I'm the customer, I just got that directly into my inbox immediately as soon as I finish configuring. So that's a good demonstration of DriveWorks Pro. Now, again, it's four seats of software wrapped into one, all relating through a network. And that's really what this represents. This is something called Pro Server. Pro Server actually connects to SQL because DriveWorks at this point operates on a SQL backbone. And then all of these different modules work together in concert to be able to give you a full solution. Now, this is my favorite slide in the entire presentation. This shows just how powerful DriveWorks is. So you have integration in lots of different ways. So it integrates with PDM. So you create master models that it's going to copy and drive. It'll check out those master models automatically, make the copies, drive them, close them down, and then check them into the vault. It works with SOLIDWORKS MBD. So after you're done, it'll generate a brand new 3D PDF and even send that 3D PDF to someone if you wanted to. It works with CamWorks and also SolidWorks Cam. So at the end of it, if you wanted your toolpaths to be regenerated for your copies and you wanted other aspects of the design for being able to use G-code and a machine to be changed up as well, all that information can be created by DriveWorks automatically. Now here's where it gets even more powerful. It can integrate with Salesforce. And now it can do input and output. That means you can pull information from Salesforce and push it into Salesforce. Now I do that right now. So I have a DriveWorks project that takes all of my calendar entries, puts them into a table, and then I click a button and automatically they show up right within DriveWorks. It'll also integrate with SysPro in a very similar way. Also SQL and SAP. So if you have any system that has a SQL backend, it can do input and output control with as well. Now, I usually like to say the front end doesn't matter. All that matters is the back end at the end of the day, because DriveWorks can become another front end for you. If you have a system, let's say it's called Goldmine or XA or something like that, it really doesn't matter what the name of the database is. All that matters is what's the backbone. And if I were to work with you on implementation, I would ask you that question: what kind of database backbone are you using? So if you're using a SQL backbone, it's pretty simple. DriveWorks has a native way of integrating with SQL and being able to query SQL to pull information out and also to dump information back into SQL. And all you have to do is dump in the right information, and you could keep the same front end for your database as you've always had. So that means that if you wanted to put in part numbering information, you wanted to create part numbers with DriveWorks and dump them into the system, you wanted to pull customer information, all on the fly, immediately showing up in a form control, maybe a listing so that you can choose the correct customer. You wanted to control your pricing based upon things that are already in your ERP. All of that can be done right inside of DriveWorks automatically. It even integrates with PayPal. So if you wanted people to buy things directly off your website through your DriveWorks project, they could do that. And a lot of other databases through ODBC links. Now, ODBC basically is a fancy term that essentially means it's a way of exchanging information between two databases, even though they don't speak the same language. So if DriveWorks wants to be able to communicate with Oracle, DriveWorks does not have a native Oracle connection. So you download a driver, an ODBC driver for Oracle. DriveWorks talks to the ODBC driver talks to Oracle, and they're able to talk to each other. Same thing, if you got some older IBM database, if there's an ODBC link for it, there's a good chance that DriveWorks is going to be able to link with it. All right, so here's what our customer says. Now, this is a guy that I just returned from on a 1-week consulting trip. Wonderful man to work with, an absolute super genius. He came to us because he essentially created DriveWorks himself in Microsoft Excel, linking with design tables into SOLIDWORKS. He said, "We were led to DriveWorks after researching CPQ solutions. We had been involved in automating our designs through elaborate design tables, and we're also working on improving communication between engineering and inside sales. Those two things met in the middle, and we found that having an engineering-focused system was the best match for our business process. We have reduced engineering time in many previously manual tasks. We've also been able to capture our design standards in the system. So they're actually reducing time, and we even went this past week, another part of it was reducing it even more, hopefully, and even future-proofing their implementation. They've got design standards in the system, which I've seen as a weakness in many companies, that they're able to maintain. During this process, we've also done quite a bit of data cleanup across all departments, and that's almost an understatement. I mean, they've totally turned the place upside down, found errors in their pricing, found errors in the way that they're sending out standards to customers, and the entire organization is now getting behind this. Now, this is if you're doing a full implementation all the way to the web where you want customers to be able to interact and immediately configure, have accurate pricing, and so forth. You'll probably have to do a pretty massive cleanup. But to just start at the beginning, you can start with DriveWorks Solo or DriveWorks Express. Just automate one small engineering project and grow from there. This will have many other ancillary impacts, like improving our forecasting, adding more detail to our website and our marketing literature, among many other things. So this is David Dewey at Industrial Magnetics Incorporated in Boyne City, Michigan. So, how about that Tesla? I promised you that we would actually go and start configuring one, so promise kept. I'm going to click on Order Now. And this might actually seem kind of familiar because we've kind of done this already with DriveWorks, but I've got a nice black Tesla. Maybe instead, I don't want a solid black Tesla. Maybe I want a midnight silver. Now for my wheels, maybe I want a different size wheel or a different wheel type. For my interior, and I want you to see what happens to that price right here when I change the interior. Maybe I want a different kind of interior, and depending upon what I choose, I can get an immediate price update. So let's choose back to here, and let's see. Yep, now it's at $10.38. So depending upon what you choose, you get immediate guided price. You can change what kind of battery you have. That'll change your price. You can change that you want a P100D because you're really crazy and you want to go super fast in 2.5 seconds. And then at the end of the day, you can have it shipped to your house. So this is the next level of how customers are trying to configure. And I kind of like to say that in general, if Elon Musk is doing it, there's a good chance that it's good technology. So he's down with configuring, pricing, and quoting. So this is what Fisher will provide you if you decided to move forward with a DriveWorks solution. In general, by the way, because I'm an implementer and a mentor for this, I don't recommend starting large. I recommend starting as small as is needed. If that's Express, just start there. Start with a simple project. If that's Solo, start there. If it's Pro, go ahead and start there, but just bear in mind that Pro is going to require more implementation effort. So I can provide a demo for your company. Also, if you guys needed a proof of concept to see whether or not this can work with your data, you could give us your data. We can automate it a little bit and show you that it's actually possible. If you needed some kickoff mentoring instead, so let's say you're thinking, nah, we got a super genius in-house. He went through the Solo training. He knows exactly what he's doing. What we just need your help with is give us some mentoring about the best way to kick things off. All right, fair enough. We'll give you some mentoring for that as well. Basically, just charge you an hourly consulting fee to help you set things up and form a punch list of items that you can work through, and we show you how to do. And then you'd be able to set up a nice little project that you can show to your leadership team. We also do turnkey consulting. So I've recently had a good friend of mine who's working at another company say, you know, we kind of have a bandwidth issue. Would you be willing to take this on and help us finish out this implementation? We do that as well. I also do training and then also full implementation services. So if you just want training and then you want to be off to the races, we can do that. But if you want full implementation services, including milestone development, so in other words, helping you form a project plan and walking through that entire project plan methodically, we can help you do that. We also assist with mentoring in that, where we help you to form that punch list of items that needs to be created and then essentially form a lesson plan to teach you how to do each of those different parts of the implementation. And then obviously we provide technical support as well. All right, so you can follow us on social media. at all of these different sites. And if you guys do have any questions, please feel free to ask. But I just did want to take the time to say thank you for tuning in. My email is there if you have specific questions for your company. If you guys are one of our clients and you're excited about this and want to be able to schedule a demo, or you already have DriveWorks and you're wondering how can I kick my project off to do better, feel free to send me an email and I would love to help.